I'm hoping that you can hear me as I had some minor technical difficulties and had to make a new stream. So I'm just trying to get everything up and running so that I can see it on my spare screen, and then we can get started. As you can see, this is the Personal Space Tarot. So for those who aren't kind of familiar with this deck, this is an old deck. I think it came out 2016, 2017 perhaps. So very old, but I will share my reasons as to why I'm going through this in a second. Hello. I'm so glad that you can hear me. Thank you for jumping in and just swapping it over to live chat. We're also trying a top down again because I'd really like to perfect the top down. I did it on our podcast, and I see no reason why I can't adjust it for our videos, but we'll see. So we're experimenting today. So hello Julie, hello Manuela, hello Joanna with your little spanner. Is anyone familiar with this deck, by the way, before we jump in? Because I'm really curious. It's just not a deck that I see around much at all. As you can see here, 2016, so I wasn't that far off the mark with my guesses. And it just comes in this tuck box. I'm not one to get fussy over the box, right? It's just of zero importance to me whatsoever. if I'm going to be really honest with you. And the reason that I have this deck, because I feel like I need to give just a minute backstory before we dive into the cards, and this will be a walkthrough through the whole deck. So for anyone watching this or watching back, if you don't want spoilers at this late stage in the game, there's your warning. It went on to my wish list in 2016 when I was quite fresh to 𝗪𝗁𝗺 online. So obviously I had familiarity with tarot growing up, but not so much anything like to do with indie decks or online tarot world. And this popped up and it was very kind of my vibe, very much so, to the point of I have other decks like this and I have them to the side as well because I want to talk about that. But needless to say, this was an indie deck. It was quite difficult to get over in the UK unless I wanted to pay customs and stuff like that, and I just never managed to get it from a UK stockist until it went out of kind of out of print for a while and also out of stock. And it was one of the only decks that I ever sort of had, can you get FOMO after the fact, like that kind of experience? And it stayed on my list for the longest time. So when it came back into Little Red Tarot, which is one of the UK indie stockists, perhaps, was it this year or last year? I don't know. My partner said, just, you know, bite the bullet, get the deck. If you don't like it, you can pass it on. And I'll be really honest, aside from speaking about it briefly in my deck collection videos, I still haven't used it properly. I have not even really many previous initial thoughts, although I have seen the whole deck from back when I watched the zillion walkthroughs. So I thought it might be really fun to go through it with everyone and just something kind of light and chill to do. It's made by someone called 𝗪𝗻𝗀𝗀𝗀, I want to say. And then I think that they did the artwork as well as the write-up. I'm not going to go into the book too much. It's your average little white book, other than it's not white, at least not on the outside. But it says here, just to give you a kind of idea, Personal Space Tarot utilises movement and change to define the major arcana, whether you seek meaning for a specific event, change or decision, or wish to widen the scope and view your life in a critical way, the major arcana offer more specific answers, where the minor arcana is more flexible in interpretations. Personal Space Tarot views the entirety of the major arcana as a journey to complete. When certain cards pop up in a reading, perhaps that is the point you are at in your journey, or perhaps this is the point in your journey you will need to focus on most. Doesn't really give us much of a description on the deck, and you can see we've got a little bit of writing on each of the majors, and then with the minors it goes, which is very interesting to me, it goes into more of a numerology type approach, but I would argue that this is a very Риder-Waite-Smith influenced deck, and we'll have a look and you can tell me what you think. There are two spreads. What I read when I was looking up this deck, just to kind of refresh my memory about what she'd said about it, is experiment in human intimacy and something about themes of the motifs in the world of tarot. These are the backs, just so that I can flip them around and give you a real idea of what we're looking at. And it's kind of I want to say it's a husky navy blue, but it's got like a bit of a purple tinge to it, if that makes sense. And is it reversible? I know people have feelings about this. No, it's not. It's not reversible, peeps. Apologies. For me, this is one of those spacious decks that I love so much. And I have to say, back when it came out, these weren't as common. Like, you can get lots of them now. I'm a prime example of having quite a few decks like this, and in honesty, it's probably why I didn't need to get this deck, but hey ho. And the aim, in my view, is to be very spacious, to weed down a lot of the visual clutter and retain just certain key points of the symbology in, as I say, what I feel is mainly Риder-Waite-Smith, into a more like minimalistic style. So you'll see things that are Риder-Waite-Smith adjacent or familiar. And yeah, I think that's enough to sort of start getting into it. I'm wondering if I should zoom in a little bit more, or whether this is okay for people. Let me know, because I can zoom in. As you can see, the whole colour palette of this deck is these few simple colours. So we've got the background colour, and then the three key colours are that kind of almost indigo colour that's on the back that we get accents of throughout. And then a kind of beigey colour that pops and looks more like white on the camera. And then this, again, like a dusky or rusty red colour. And that's the theme throughout the deck. And it's something that I really loved, and something that I, again, hadn't seen much of in 2016. So we're going back in time. If I didn't tell you, that's what we're doing. Forget the future, we're diving into the past. One of the other things I'd add is I'm not sure what this deck is trying to be in terms of the visual world that you are welcomed into, but what I would say is I'm here for it. I think the overall theme is perhaps nature, but as we go through the cards, you're going to see skeletons, you're going to see bones, you're going to see people, parts of people. And then very nature-based, like humanless depictions. And it's very interesting because it doesn't really fit one of those niches solidly, but kind of just does its own thing across the board. So here we have the Fool. I'm not going to speak about every single card, and I have to say nowadays I'm less bothered about the majors than I am the minors, so I'll be really curious to hear how other people feel about that, because I don't know, I feel like the minors fell sort of victim to this being less important from like historic approaches to tarot, and actually for me visually they are equally important. It does sound like a Tegan deck, you're correct. It's a very me deck, although it has heavy competition in my collection. I've really got to stop interrupting myself and wait to read comments because it makes me lose my train of thought, but I love seeing comments. Thank you for hanging out, by the way, peeps that are here. Yeah, anyway, majors, just not as important to me. Of course, there are certain things that I like to see. I'm going to move that over there. But I don't know. It's not something that I am as focused on. I don't even want to pick the cards up because they're getting some glare. Let's zoom in a little bit and then I can zoom back out. But be prepared because the camera is going to have a moment where it wobbles. There we go. We're not using big tech here at the 𝗵𝗿 household, but it all works. Another thing that this deck does well, and I think it's aged because there are a lot like this now that do a lot more for things like gender expression that this deck doesn't do. So I don't think there are any title changes, but there might be. I'll keep an eye on it. But what it did do is it did a lot of sort of gender ambiguity from what I can remember. Not always, but predominantly through the human cards and the human element. And again, like I say, at the time, it didn't really have as much competition. But you can see it's not always ambiguous. Although I would argue, I feel like this kind of is. I do really love the depictions. They're very simple. As you can see, the High Priestess has still got her... Oh, the name of this has completely left the building. What on earth is that? Is it a passion fruit? No. Someone's going to type it in the comments for me in a minute because my brain is definitely evading me. Anyway, we see this in the High Priestess a lot. It's there. We've also got the moon, although it's a crescent, which I feel like is less common. But you can see that the individual is cradled by the moon. I would have loved some name changes, but again, just wasn't common in 2016, I feel like. There are a couple of decks that were very much before their time. And this was kind of a midline one for me. And the Empress, again, I feel, despite the title, pretty ambiguous and whittled down to the star crown and then this really interesting conception of fertility, which when I talk about feelings about the pregnant Empress, I fear that sometimes they go down wrong. I've got lots of decks where the Empress is pregnant and I can fully appreciate them. I also have a plethora of feelings as to why it's not necessarily my favourite thing to see, and why I don't necessarily feel it's inherently inclusive. And also it's just a bit of a tough depiction for me as an individual based on my own experiences with infertility and stuff like that. So of course I'm going to have a bias again, like towards other depictions of the Empress, but also I feel like the fertility and the magic of nature and growth can come through in so many different ways, and it's nice to have some decks that depict that visually, because when people are learning, if they're only used to seeing it one way, that can of course box them in eventually. And I feel like this doesn't box them in. It gives you something else to consider. If you've been at it for ages, like a bunch of us here, it's not so important, but it's a nice change. Manuela says, I agree that the day-to-day is really important, and that is where the minors are so helpful. Yes, and you find the court cards are neglected in some decks, like the Wild Unknown or the Spacious Tarot, where I feel like the court cards are so similar. That's really interesting because I agree. I feel like court cards are definitely also neglected, or that people don't necessarily know how to express them in kind of a a less constricted capacity, but I don't feel like that about the Wild Unknown. I don't have the Spacious Tarot, so I'm not a good example of that, but I will say that I understand why the Wild Unknown is not many people's favourite cults. A lot of people have expressed difficulties with working with those cults to me. Hey Vika, welcome. This is something that I always find interesting between the Empress and the Emperor in these kind of spacious-y decks, is that the Empress for some reason will more often than not still be a human, and the Emperor is more likely to be a symbol or some kind of other being, entity, representation, and that's something I really notice. It doesn't always happen, but this is, again, to me, such a beautiful skull and a depiction. In 2022, it's a little on the nose. In 2016, it probably wasn't, and I'm really aware of how much tarot has happened since then and how much tarot I've like visually ingested as well from social media that now informs my opinion of this deck in a different way. And had I have had it sooner, I really think I would have felt differently. I don't think that this is meant to be a moon. I think that these shapes are, I could be wrong, but I feel like sometimes they're just in there to be shapes, but I don't know. And I will say, one of the things that I remember people sort of critiquing with this deck is that there isn't much discussion always on the visual choices, but there are sometimes. I think that was more to do with the minors, to be honest. So here we say it's represented by a single ram skull that signifies determination, leadership and intellect, with an ankh sword, life and call to action resting in the background. So yeah, it doesn't say anything about the sun or the moon, so that's definitely just a stylistic choice. One of the things that is funny to me is that we often have these agreed upon symbols like the ram for things like determination and structure and power. And I, in terms of the animal, wholeheartedly agree with that. What I would say is that people who don't know about the animal or whatever symbol that's being used, they can read that and it gives them a layer of understanding as to why this has been chosen in terms of how the person sees it, but there's no explanation as to why. Like, even just a word about rams are very strong-minded and they use their head to butt things and get through structures, and there's not a lot of that. There's sort of this unconscious agreement that people know inherently, oh well, ram symbolizes this and therefore that's why it's been used. I don't know if that makes sense, because it's kind of a nuance, because she does say about the keywords but not why it's assigned to ram, and that really is just a quibble, nothing more. A very interesting Emperor, it works, and the Empress is embodied as a human in comparison. Yeah. The Numerous Tarot is so great for deconstructing and reconstructing the cults creatively. Yes, the Numerous Tarot was on my wish list for a long time, but I could never decide on it because there are quite a few modern elements to that deck. And as you can see, this, I suppose, is modern art, but it's not modern day life. And I'm not the best with modern day life decks. I feel this has a mix of like spaciousness and very occasionally feels a little bit abstract, but not that much. The Hierophant is very much boiled down to the key components. You have the little bone here. I like the hand is in this position, but I can't think of the name for it. Like I said, I don't want to stay on all of the cards for too long. And the Lovers feels very connective to me. What I appreciate about this Lovers is that it feels like a decision to me. It feels like a connection. It feels like a pathway, layers of like commitment there, but there's no reference to what kind of relationship and agreement this is. And that in itself adds a layer of ambiguity, which means we can kind of project whatever we want onto there. This is merely a moment in connection. It almost reminds me of doing pinky promise or pinky swears with my stepmom. If anyone's familiar with that. And I appreciate that. I think that the lovers can become very literal. And whilst I can work with that, as I say, the majors I get less bothered about as time goes on. It's a preference that it's maybe perhaps not so literal in sort of romance and those kind of layers. Yeah, for the Emperor, it definitely could be an Aries association as well, but it would be great if there was like a little note to that if astrology was being used. I don't think that there's any mention of the astrology, but also it's, like I said, a very 𝗪𝗿_𝗁𝗂 deck, and that's sort of tied into, from memory, the majors in the 𝗪𝗿_𝗁𝗂, right? Then we've got the Archer instead of the Chariot. So we do have some name changes. I don't know how I forgot this. And I was really surprised by this change because maybe there's no animals in this deck other than, like, there's a bird flying, but I don't think there's any animals as the key focus. So perhaps whittling down the Chariot just didn't make sense. I think that the creator actually made this a pin. The Archer for me definitely works in terms of it being swift, which is something that I often feel like the Chariot has quite not always a rapid energy to it, but certainly, if not rapid, quite a big, sometimes again, overwhelming is not really the word I want, but something there or thereabouts. And I'm not one who needs the 2 horses or anything like that for the symbolism. I'm actually usually far more drawn to the Chariot itself as a representation of like how we see ourselves or how we present ourselves. Also, more recently, the competitive element of it, which I do feel like you can get from the Archer. This gives me a kind of Robin Hood in disguise vibe. So if anyone was into Disney Robin Hood, definitely like when he dresses up as a bird and enters the archery tournament. So in terms of tournaments and like a race or a championship or those layers of the Chariot, if we think about a Chariot's traditional use, that's definitely there still. Some of the other nuances, when I go a bit more, I don't know, left of field, and like I was saying about it as a representation of like who we once were and where we're moving to, not as clear here, but certainly if we're the Archer, we're directing the arrows, and that's done with will and intent. So I feel like even the elemental associations are working for that one. Is it a deck that people who are starting out would find easy if they're going to use like a 𝗪𝗿_𝗁𝗂 booklet? No, not so much probably. Although you can start with anything you want. The hand sign in the Hierophant is the sign of benediction. Thank you. I should have just asked you straight away, Joanna. Hello to everyone jumping in, by the way. Tarot and Witchery, a little bit too minimal for your taste. I totally understand. I have some busy decks, I have some photographic decks, but there's definitely a big portion of me that has a minimal flavour. And as I say, I have 3 decks to my right that I'm going to get out soon as well and speak a little bit about. I'm going to go a tiny bit faster. Justice, it's brought down to the scales. I have no real feelings about this. I think that this is very 𝗪𝗿_𝗁𝗂. It's not particularly ingenuitive, is that the word that I want? But it works. And one of the things that the creator had said was that they wanted to boil it down to like those key components that are familiar in tarot, but that come away from the sort of bustle or overwhelm of other aspects. Then we've got the Hermit. And this kind of has like a really desert vibe to me, which is a new hermit vibe, but it still has all of the elements and it works so well. Like being stuck in the desert, or at least being out in the desert alone, has a whole vibe to it in itself that, I don't know about you, but is equally like being in the middle of the forest alone. There is a mood here, and I do get very deserty vibes from this particular deck, I have to say. Again, the Hermit feels very ambiguous to me in terms of gender representation, and I love that. I definitely could have changed a few and really upped the ante, but I think that when people is often to try and make the deck more accessible to newer people should they use it. That's my assumption anyway. I like the Wheel of Fortune. I much prefer this, even though I have to say I don't have like a massive relationship to this, which is probably ironic to people because I have let's see if I can pull it out. I'm hoping my signal's still okay because it's looking blurry to me, but I have this on my altar, but I was actually gifted that by the creators. I didn't buy that one. I do appreciate that the symbology in this feels more beneficial to me than the kind of Wheel of Fortune game show type that's sometimes expressed. I do like the Wheel of Fortune when it's more like the fates. I enjoy that. If anyone's ever seen the original Mythic Tarot, they have a kind of the fates, and I think it's 3 women depicted on that going on, and I enjoy that. But yeah, anything that looks like a game show, I'm not into. We've got Strength, and as you can see, which I didn't speak to, Justice is 8 and Strength is 11. I, at this stage, couldn't care less. But if I was going to choose, it's the wrong way round. Just for me, because I like it. I like Strength as 8. But I do think that this to me is a far more powerful expression of strength than some of the other cards. This is more of a standout. Like the fact that they're holding their heart and it's a flame gives me that kind of really wild nature, alive, the risk of putting your heart forward and all that comes with that, and how they're cradling it but they're not covering it. I just think that the heart center type of message that can sort of get lost within the physical strength element of other cards really shines through in this one. The Hanged Man is the Hanged Man. They are a skeleton. They are very, very cute. They look pretty chilled out, so it gives me more the suspension vibes as opposed to the kind of being forced to see a different perspective, which is kind of a nuance in this card. But at the same time, it's a skeleton, so we could be really morbid and presume that there was someone hanging here originally, right? That being said, this deck has skeletons throughout, so if that's just creeped you out and made you feel funny, don't worry. I'm sure that wasn't the actual representation, but it does lead nicely into death. One of the things I would say about how freaking cute this deck is that I very much enjoy the cute factor, and I enjoy the simplicity or the spaciousness, whatever word that you want to assign to it, that it makes sense to you. But one of the things that I miss in decks like this is some of the more challenging visual representations. I think often when they get whittled down to symbols or more clutter-free, that they're just not they don't evoke as many challenging or like difficult feelings in me. So the Brady Tarot, for example, I think the 5 of something has like an injured polar bear on it on melting ice, whereas this death card is just very cute. It still has everything I need. It has a mixture of things that are buried, things that have the leaves have fallen away, but perhaps they'll grow back, things that are growing from the decay. It has it all. It's beautiful. It's just something I notice about these type of decks. Temperance, very much down to your base levels. There'll be some repetition in this. And the devil, again, it's got that Christian devil kind of vibe meets what people think satanic worship looks like. Something that I thoroughly enjoy as a visual, but obviously not something that I feel is an actual representation. And the devil, I feel, is possibly one of the most cliche cards in the whole entire deck, because it seems to be one that people really rarely stray away from. And I think I've never discussed that because I freaking love devil imagery. I will take it all, whether it's a goat with like hooves on fire, or a depiction of, you know, like I said, the Christian devil, or even just a different version of what people believe to represent the devil in like different pantheons. But I do think that it, again, people don't seem to be able to like veer away from it very much. And we've got the tower, which I suppose the mountains are the representation of structure. And then this is one of those reminders that this is kind of an elemental nature deck, because we've got lightning and rain here. And of course, the higher up you are, the more likely the lightning is going to hit your ass. So it works for me. In terms of the elements, it works for me. I was actually writing and talking to a client today about how nature doesn't promise us ease, and how it's a representation of like discomfort and risk, and how with the good comes the bad, and how these things are all intrinsically connected to each other. And that I separate that as humans, but nature is like a prime example. So this tower works for me in that aspect. The star gets a very star treatment. I'm not mad at it. It's cute. I kind of like the dripping blood. It adds an element. I don't have much to say about that one, or the moon, or the sun, but I do love all of them in terms of just beauty. The little eye does make me feel like this is a tiny nod to your third eye and your intuition. But again, I feel like that would be very hard for anyone to look at this card that was unfamiliar with tarot and know that. I do feel like that's incredibly challenging. For anyone who's still here, by the way, is it blurry for you, or is it just the way that I am seeing it? Because I'm really hoping that I don't end up with a blurry. Everything has been blurry for the past few minutes, and you keep refreshing, but it doesn't help. No. I don't actually know how to fix that. Let's have a look. This may very well pause my live stream, folks, so please remain, and I will see what I can do. Now I'm hoping, although that has definitely changed the lighting, that we have readjusted. We've readjusted. Okay, I don't know how many cards were blurry, so I'm just going to just go back through a couple. Oh, you can see fingerprints. Lovely, lovely. So this is the Death card. This is the Temperance. This is the Devil. Thank you for sticking with me through the blur. The comments are very delayed. So this is the Tower, the Moon, the Star. Oh, the Star and the Moon were the wrong way round, but hey ho. And then the Sun, which, as I say, it's got sunflowers. I do like that it's, firstly, not got the naked baby, which I know everyone's sick of hearing people say, but it's not a card for me either, right? I do like the gleefulness, and I like the call to perhaps our inner child, as opposed to the way we define and suppress aspects of joy and expression when we become adults. But in terms of sunflowers and the way that they move towards the sun and how they behave when there's no sunshine, I feel like that's a lovely element that, if you're familiar with sunflowers, is going to add a layer for you. Judgment doesn't do anything for me, not going to lie. It's one of those cards where I'm like, okay, we've got the 4 elements. So our wand, our sword, our cup, our pentacle, a little wreath. I don't really know what this is meant to be. Our 4 elements are perhaps coming together for Judgment Day. I don't know. I can see the elemental gathering. I just don't see how this is reflective of judgment. Perhaps looking sharp again. That will not give it replayability, will it? That is definitely disappointing. I'll have to put a note in the thingy. Judgment is really about getting to the bottom of things and attempting to finish a chapter in your life through periods of self-evaluation and reflection. Maybe you've just come out of the other side of a conflict, significant life change, or stressful decision. Now you're reviewing the actions and behaviours you've experienced in that setting, and possibly rethinking and retooling your resources for the future. So this is us gathering and retooling, I'm assuming. Positive reflection always helps us in our quest for personal growth. I mean, any reflection helps us. Quibble. And you'll be surprised of the opportunities it can provide as well. Without proper reflection, mistakes and failures often result in self-doubt. Agree. But think of them more as opportunities to evolve your character and view your life as a continual growing process. Okay, I like that. I like that. That's a decent write-up and a very confusing depiction, right? Yeah, that's weird. Judgment as a mirror of the magician. Yeah, possibly. Nope, the magician doesn't have all of the tools in this deck. They have a paintbrush, which I do enjoy. Definitely enjoy the paintbrush. I can use this, but because I know what judgment means, and that's the only reason. And even looking at that meaning doesn't help me much. If I was a newbie, I'd be like, what? So I'm not going to lie. Least favourite major. Least favourite. The world, however, with the Ouroboros, and we've come back to, so there's definitely like that symbolism. We've got like elemental layers, sometimes astrological, and there's a third word that I'm forgetting. The meeting of the 2 candles to create the 1 flame. I really love this, and I again get bored of the world card being just some person floating in the air. So I like that this is whittled down to the Ouroboros. And we're jumping into the minors. The aces are very, very simple the whole way through the deck, from what I remember. They are merely the representation of what the suit is. And there are no names on them, but it's very, despite the colour palette, it's easy enough to discern between them as far as I'm concerned. You will have to let me know for you if it feels like it's a visual challenge or not. I'll lay some cards out at the end, but we've got the initial ace and the use of this circle to kind of bring our attention to that spark of will, that direction, that power. If you think of how we infuse our wands or our staffs or anything like that, if you use any tool in your practice, or just how we direct power in general, like even here with my beautiful Ouroboros candle scribe, when we're doing things like that, we're directing energy, and I think that that's a lovely way to depict that, albeit simple. to me, this is still giving very like red hot 𝗫𝗁𝗺𝗃 vibes. We've got this is in the 𝗫𝗁𝗺𝗃, right? So the reason that I'm repeating that is because we're going to get to a few cards that go entirely left of field, and you'll understand why I then draw attention to these ones, because seeing the world and the crossover of basically what I would see as like the concept and the desire to direct that, and the meeting of those coming together from just this energy that's swirling around in the ace to here, to then like unlocking the world at our feet. That's this kind of vibe that it gives me. But I also think that, again, I'm not going to say it too many more times. I've said any beginner can use any deck and actually have like a real moment with it. But would I recommend it to a beginner? No, because I think this would just confuse quite a lot of people. Unless there's a 𝗫𝗁𝗺𝗃 book that speaks about the world and the imagery that might pop up in the 𝗫𝗁𝗺𝗃, but I'm trying to remember what that card looks like. I know the 3 is looking out. I can't remember what the 2's doing. How's it going? Hello, hello. You have made it to the minors. We're in the wands and going, unfortunately, a little slower than I would have liked. Also, we had a really blurry moment, but we're back. We're back. The 3 has been done many a time now. This reminds me of various cards. The Wild Unknown has one like this, and we're like looking through this meeting of this 3-way triangle where the structure has been made, there's movement, we're seeing the growth inside that's occurring from this third and final, I suppose, conception, because to me the 3 is the first time that something blooms in terms of numerology, and then you get that repeat in the 6, for example. The 4, very celebratory, very kind of outside, I don't know, pagan festival vibes. No people, not mad at the no people. You're a sucker for any Ouroboros card. Yeah, you and me both, definitely. It's just such beautiful imagery. I do have mild, occasional sad feelings about it, but only because as someone who studies and works with animals, in animal world, if a snake does that, it's not for a good reason. But in terms of like a cult or just historic symbology, I do really love the Ouroboros still. In the 5, this is like a close-up, right? We zoom in to the 𝗫𝗁𝗺𝗃. I do love the people's tats. I'm digging the tats. Again, they're crossing. You can't see the people, so I do feel like this opens up the interpretation of what's going on a little bit. But again, it makes it very ambiguous. Great for me, probably not that useful to some other people. And the 6, we've got the reef. So it's almost like after the celebration, I feel, in this one, in terms of, I know I said celebration for 4, I don't mean it in that way, but there's something about the people being in this one, if you're going to go 𝗫𝗁𝗺𝗃, that's probably helpful to discern between these 2, because this is a victory, this is triumph, this is power, being collected over a certain experience. In terms of our progression, definitely from the 5 to the 6, you could almost say that the 6 are the victors of the spoil. Works totally fine for me. I can definitely see how this has been whittled down from the 𝗫𝗁𝗺𝗃, but I think that the bit that I do like to discern between these 2 for someone who is maybe struggling a little bit more is the structure of the wands. So the tallest one here is the one that has the headdress. We're just going to call it a headdress. Here you can actually see that the 4 are making a square. It's a little off center, but because this, for some reason, really leans heavily into the numerology, despite being Rider-Waite-Smith symbology, if we think about fours as structure, and I often think about the initial few cards as shapes as well. I have this weird thing, so for me the fours are just squares. Then that's a good way to kind of break that up. These are kind of scattered around, so there is a different feeling to them. They're all standing equally, but not the same. Let's make a deck where each card is an Ouroboros. Do you know what? I have an idea for how you could do that. Because at first I was thinking, well, how confusing would that be? But you could literally, you know how the Medicine Woman Tarot has circles and then every scene is within the circle? That's kind of how I would make an Ouroboros deck. I think that that would be awesome. It would be like a portal. Oh, it would be a portal. I should copyright the idea now. But I can't. We should make a deck together. Technically, it was your idea. But yeah, the Ouroboros and then a portal into each, like, the psyche of that particular card. How cool would that be? I'm here for it. The 7 gets a little bit more abstract. The hand positioning really throws me off, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. So what I'm going to say is, for anyone watching, what would you say about this card? For me, it's far more, I'm focused on the positioning. It gets a bit more like visual pip for me. So we know that the 7th wand is like breaking the energy between the other 6, or they're trying to come into the 7th. Either way you want to read it, we come into this moment where there's something different has to happen, and so whether that's battling out that energy or reflecting in, dependent on how you work with the cards, that's how I would view that. But as for these and the hand shape, there's not much there for me. I do love this, although it gives me a mixture of feelings, because the bird's cute, but the fact that the bird's sitting on it so still doesn't make it feel like there's as much movement as I would anticipate. However, if anything was going to chill out on something that was flying through the air and not be concerned about it, it would be a bird. So there you go. But I just love it because it's cute. That's literally it. It does look Star Trek-y, doesn't it? What are the symbols? Yeah, they're cup, moon, crown, and then skull. So on this deck, it's then hard to be able to tell whether the skull, let's try and get you close up without the sheen, whether the skull is a representation of death or just people, because it's sort of people in this deck. Then we've got the 9, and we've got it being used as a staff. It gives you that long journey vibe. It gives you nearing the end. We're nearing all of these wands. We've come a long way. I definitely get the journey vibe from that. And then the 10, we're going with the bundle without the people carrying it. And we have the other 3 elements like intertwined around that, which is an interesting way to think of the wands card and its completion. So I'm not mad at it. Again, it's not one I have many feelings about. Then we get into the courts, and they are traditionally named Page, Knight, Queen, King. So here we have the Page, and it's very similar to me to the Ace, but all of a sudden we've got all this energy coming out, and there's no real direction to the energy, which feels very fitting for a page. It's kind of like something's going on, but we're learning how to manage it. There's that element of like knowledge but novice. Yes, so it does have a very kind of transient light tarot feel, and I recently watched Kelly Maddox's video of the transient light, and that was one of the things that reminded me that I had this, because I don't feel like I could ever own the 2 decks, and I really wanted to put to the test what this might offer me in my practice, other than being a deck that I had looked for and loved for so long from afar that I finally got it. Because as I say, whilst it did a lot of things that other decks didn't do in its time, that's since not the case. And that's not a problem, because decks age and I use a lot of old decks, but I'm already bonded to those and I'm not bonded to this. And I think that's where that interesting friction arises. But in honesty, when I buy a deck, almost 10 out of 10, I know that I at least want it. And this one was a very like, oh, it's probably past too much time. And then I just let my partner decide for me. So yeah, this has got the knight, and they are very knighty. It's not my favourite. It's not my favourite. This card stock, by the way, isn't glossy. It's just got that. It's like matte before matte became all these other things like velvet and rose petal and thick and yada yada. This used to be called matte, I'm sure it did, or at least like satin, I don't know. So it's smooth, it's not sticky, it's thin, durable, it's got a good shuffle, kind of like perhaps feels like the wooden tarot but slightly thinner, to give you a cardstock idea. The Queen and the King. And see, whilst these are still so freaking simple, I actually prefer these to the Knight. Like, I would have rather something else than the person in the armour. Whereas this, with the curling sort of vine way that the sunflower has gone around this, gives me that nourishing expression of our will and our creativity. And that perhaps more inward expression of that. And then the King with a more outward structured antler expression of that, and at their feet, like at their feet is a skull. It's kind of like, it probably doesn't mean this, but it does give me that don't fucking mess with me vibe, which is a wand's mood. Yeah, it's a wand's mood. Now we're on the swords. Very simple ace, has a crown. Normally I'd be like, huh? But the crown goes on the head. The head makes me think of the mind and consciousness and thought and all of those layers. So that works for me, but I had to like sort of jump to get there. This feels onesie to me. I like to see, I would have preferred to actually see the blindfold, if anything. The twos as a crossing point with two options and the friction in between does work for me in terms of twos numerically. But in terms of the Rider-Waite-Smith, the blindfold tells me about conceiving something and thinking something in our minds, but not fully forming it and not feeling perhaps clear on it yet. And I like that layer a little bit more. Yeah, and as Joanna says, the crown is in the Rider-Waite-Smith and the 𝗺 Ace of Swords. This has been done, it's been done, it's been done, it's been done. And I feel like because I'm wanting to be very upfront about how I experience each card, it may then feel like I'm being mean on this deck, and I'm not, because I wouldn't have got it if I didn't think that it was good. And like I said, in 2016, it did a lot of things that other decks weren't doing. This is now in a space where it didn't exist originally. So it's almost like an unfair comparison without there being a comparison. But like, whenever I see this, I'm like, come on, now, let's do something different, please. Whereas this is doing something different. I love this. Do you know how freaking hard it actually is to pull something from a tree trunk? Like, forget sword in the stone. It's not easy to pull something from wood once you've wedged it in there, be it a hammer, a pickaxe, a sword, whatever it is. I love that there's almost like a definite feeling about, you put these three in here purposefully so that you could rest and they'll remain there. Like, those concepts, those places, those plans, that forethought, all the stuff that's swirling around in our mind. It's not like it's going to go away if we pause and rest. That would be glorious if we could make it do that. It doesn't. But it feels very purposeful. It's not like they've just been slung down. And that to me gives that formative, structural 4 feeling, you know, that square that I was talking about. Yeah, that lesser known myth, sword in the tree trunk. So true. I really love some of the later sword cards. I'm just not into the beginning ones, because again, this for the 5, oh, I don't know why this moves me so much, but it does. I remember seeing this really early on in 2016 and thinking, this is the card for me. Like, what is it about this 5? Is it the falling leaves? The drowning swords? It does give me like a Lady of the Lake mild vibe. I'm going Arthurian and stuff here, which I'm not intending to. And then the crow, just kind of like looking out with its big eye into your soul. Again, are we going to be able to make you see this without it going all glossy? But I don't know. It's so simple. And yet, do you know what it reminds me of? Without getting into it too much. When I am feeling really overwhelmed mentally, physically as well, but I tend to, mental overwhelm is a thing for me. And when you're chronically ill, you're always physically overwhelmed, right? It's different. But mental overwhelm and upset as well, turmoil. This reminds me of like going outside and standing in my garden and just looking at the trees. It doesn't matter what time of year, it doesn't matter what, you know, the world is doing around me, what nature's doing, whether it's raining, whether it's sunny. But it does remind me of like just standing in the rain and just letting stuff out and having a cry and just going through the motions and speaking to the birds in my garden, which is something I do a lot anyway. So I think that's a mood. I am. Oh, the crow seems sad and you don't know why. Maybe they are sad. Maybe, I mean, crows tend to, whilst you can obviously see them alone, they tend to form pairs and be very bonded. Crows and ravens actually have really powerful, beautiful death rituals, or that's what we would call them anyway, processes of grieving and acknowledging their loved and lost ones. It's quite a powerful thing actually, without going into my animal stuff too much, but yeah, the one being on their own. And then you could almost add the layer of like when you see a crow on its own or a raven on its own, it was always considered an omen in like a bunch of folklore over the years. You love the 5s in tarot. Yes, me too. I definitely am into the 5s. Not so much feeling them, of course, but definitely the expression of them I find is very powerful. This 6 is an interesting one in terms of it feels more fitting in the numerical, you know, like the numerology side of things as a 6 than it does in terms of the Rider-Waite-Smith. I like the colour change as well because it adds like a dual quality to it that makes me think of moving from one point of view to another, but that these don't have to be in contrast to each other, that they both exist, but that we've simply moved past one into the other. So I like that. But as I say with the minors, the talk on them is very different. So I'll give you an example really quickly. We have a brief breakdown here. So for this one, swords are linked to the element of air as well as our intellectual self. Morality, strategy, rationalization, like the double-edged nature of a sword itself, the suit of swords are often at extremes: joy and pain, excitement and embarrassment, love and hate. Swords show up in a reading when you must take some time to consider both sides of I think it's meant to say a decision with an analytical mind. I liked the first half of that better than the second half, but and then 6s are responsible. artistic and nurturing, community focused and sympathetic of others. 6s are the humanitarian and the free spirit. Reversely, 6s can be self-righteous and stubborn. I think that's quite a nuanced breakdown of the card numerology, actually. So I don't know if that's how I'd have described them, but I did like the suit discussion mostly. I like this for the 7. That is 7. Yep. As you can see, my Roman numerals are great. I like it visually. The 7, again, the 7s for me are a very reflective recollection kind of space in their element. Visually, this makes me think of an 8 a little bit more, other than obviously it's not because we've got an odd number. Whereas this 8 is different. It's different. And like I said, this is where we get into the, are you a numerology deck or are you a 𝗺𝗿𝗁_𝗵 deck? Which I think to that, this deck says I'm both and neither. It definitely says it's both. But there is this center point in between the swords in which it, like, all this energy is like swirling around, all these thoughts are swirling around, and like we've got what is usually clouds underneath. So to me that says that there's a lot going on. It's like a swirling vortex of the mind that we can convince ourselves we're trapped in. So that's how I would approach that. But it's, for me, it's a strange shape. I don't know. It's a strange shape for the 8. And then we go from this. I suppose often you see the people sneaking off with the 1 sword, right? Which isn't my favourite either, but... And then this, which feels far more 𝗺𝗿𝗁_𝗵 reminiscent, with the swords over the head of the bed. Excuse me. But there's persons, like, their hands are bound. Very useful, because this alone is not going to tell anyone anything. But I don't know what it is about seeing the hands bound that, like I said, it sort of reminds me of the 8 of Swords, or it reminds me of a Wands card. It works for me contextually, but it's not a strong love affair. And then this, we get really, really, really into the 𝗺𝗿𝗁_𝗵. But do you know what's glorious about this? Every single freaking sword is different. And that's something that I appreciate. I like the ambiguity of the individual. I like that their head's bowed. It's interesting that the question is, they're focused on the sword that they're holding. They've got all these swords in their bag. And you could really get creative with this. Did they do this to themselves? Did they not realise that everyone was doing this because they were so focused on how they've tormented themselves? And that's going like really 𝗺𝗿𝗁_𝗵. Or in terms of completion, I feel like that's the last sword, you know, that's the last, it was the last piece to this inevitable outcome. And sometimes you just got to stick the last sword in and go through the motions and go through the process to get out the other side, because sometimes we're just at a space where we can't see another way out, and therefore that's where we're at. And no one finds the perfect way out. It's very hard to find purely, I suppose, balanced isn't the word that I'm looking for, but definitely tempered versions of this particular 10 if you're going to go into numerology with such a stark visual representation. I can do it, but what I acknowledge is that this doesn't necessarily lend towards that, which is why I said, is this a numerology deck? Is this a 𝗺𝗿𝗁_𝗵 deck? I feel like it's a meeting of the two, and that probably makes it a bit sticky for some people. Then we've got the page, which is the sword, and it's creating a crack in the foundations, which I like. It's like the concept that we've got in our mind that suddenly starts to break away into different thoughts and perhaps challenge some others that we were having. The Knight is a knight again. They're a knight again. The Queen is through the rose. Is this a rose? I don't know. I can't tell actually, because now these little bits are making me think not. But I do feel like a rose would be a good depiction for the Queen of Swords, because it has those beautifully delicate and fragrant petals that just are great for all of the senses. But then it's got the thorns as well. And there's that kind of cuttingness that people associate with thought and our mind and the intellect overall, that perhaps makes this Queen seem, like I said, sharper than the other three. And then for this King, we're having a sword in the stone moment. I got my sword in the stone moment. Look at it. And that's the reason I love this. No other reason than that's what it reminds me of. But in terms of like power, control, it's been placed into the ground, so it gives me that real kind of sturdy, I can hold this for you, very self-aware, astute kind of feeling. I'm aware of the time, so again, we're gonna keep going. This is gonna be like an hour and a half now. Apologies. We've got the cup. It's got wings. Is that something that someone remembers from the 𝗪𝗿𝗺𝗀𝗃? Apparently my brain's gone to sleep now. It's a cup. It is what it is. This is a strange two. I love it. And there's something about the as above, so below layer to this that works for me in a going off into the inner realms in the more intuitive capacity, in the more emotive capacity. But I still find it strange and I love it at the same time. I can't really quite describe what it does for me, because it's one that just shakes my attention ever so slightly, but seems to make sense still. The 3 is, for me, it's cute enough. It's not I don't know how I feel about one cup being bigger than the other two, purely because I see this as and the 3s as a whole as kind of equal measure. Now, not the same, because again, equality is never meant to be the same for every single person, because to be treated equally means different things for different people, which is where equality gets interesting. But if you read discussions of it, it's it's not that everyone just gets exactly the same, because what, say, I might need to be able to even like get into a building, someone else doesn't. So for me, the 3s, I suppose, whilst it wouldn't be the same necessarily situationally, the way to express that equalness for me would have just been sizing. It's kind of nitpicky. Definitely the swords and the wands, the latter half of both of them have definitely been my favourites. And I think I'm going to say the same thing about the cups from memory as well. I don't know what it is about the beginning of the suit other than like the 4 of swords. This does feel more like they're focused on the 1 cup that's full as opposed to focused on the 3 that are not. So there's a bit of a dynamic change there. That I think is very useful for numerology, but again, it doesn't give me structure either. It doesn't give me that coming together of something. And it definitely makes me feel like the 4th is more important rather than the 4th is being handed but not necessarily taken up at this moment. So I don't know whether I get the pulls of emotional capacity in this one either. I have to think on that one. The 5 is very literal. So it is the follow-on from these, you know, the spilt cups, this almost feels like glass, but I don't know if it is, and the tears. And then we've got that third eye thing going on as well. And I do think that that's a lovely way to nod to intuition as well as the emotional realm, because whilst they both exist in this, definitely one seems to get more focus than the other in some decks. The 7, very, very 7 of Cups, but it is super cute. Look, we've got a cactus with a little flower on top. So this cactus is doing very well, and like various other plants. And it's interesting because these clouds are giving me like the imagery of the world vibes. So then we get to the 8. Oh, this is the 6. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I've got confused. I see what they've done now. I'm going to say the same thing about the 7 because it's got the Ouroboros and stuff as well. And the shape is better. The 6, where I've completely blipped out, is more of a harmonious, like, I suppose is often sold in the ரிder-Waite-Smith as nostalgia, at least, or has like a childlike element to it, and now reminds me of the cup that's being handed in the ரிder-Waite-Smith 6. But I very quickly mistook this, so that will be quite interesting because I can see what it's doing. And like I was saying about the 3s, again for the 6s, because it's that continuation of the number just doubled, I like that they're all equal. Whereas for the 7, it makes sense to me that they're not all in line with each other. It's a bit more higgledy-piggledy. But I definitely confused it for a moment. It definitely happened. The 8, this is like spilled emotions and walking away. It's basically the base of the it's like a mountain, isn't it, that's got a path up it in the ரிder-Waite-Smith. It's the base of that. But for me, it really reminds me of that overspilling of emotion as well. And like, you've got to do something with it. There is definite movement there already, so you might as well continue and follow through with that movement because it's going on whether we like it or not. There's like a current, there's a stream, and I think that's a great one for the 8. You stay down there, little madam. My cat's like, it's dinner time. If she could speak, she would have said, you should have been off by 4. This is where I said it goes really left of field. This is the 9 of Cups. To me, this is the ultimate 9 of Cups, but to many people, perhaps not so much. This is like the joys of alchemy and skulls and life and death and all of the meaning that it has and the knowledge that people share with each other in the world and what we grow and what we tend to. And it's all on this fantastic little bookshelf that basically reminds me of not only a crevice in my home, but like, I don't know, Merlin's little space or something like that. It has that very fulfilling sense to me, and I don't just mean in like a physical sense of, oh, I've got all this shit. I mean more so what that represents, but definitely a different depiction for the 9 of Cups. Probably one of my favorites as well. The 10 is very 10. 1 second. 3, 6, 9. How did I not notice this before? Am I mistaken? No. Is there a 9th cup hiding in there, people? There is not. That's going to irritate the shit out of me. Final cup at the bottom. You mean this? I mean, it very much has that shape to it, doesn't it? But in every other card, the cups have been depicted very, very specifically as actual cups. Oh, I've mixed the I've mixed the stuff up now. And like this feels very reminiscent of these kind of. So yeah, I mean, I can work with that as it representing the ultimate cup and the branches, but let's just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, the cups are represented as actual individual cups in every other card. So it definitely does have those vibes in terms of what you're saying. So I could work with it, but in terms of like, this is, I don't want to be that person because I don't make decks. So I think mistakes like this they happen easier than us non-deck creators could imagine. But I'm not going to lie, they properly irritate me. Like that's left a chink in how I feel about it. It looks nice, don't get me wrong, but it just, if you're going to the whole way through the cups, make sure that there is the right amount of physical cups in every single other card and in all of your suits. And oh, I would add, this is a reprint. I'm sure changing the imagery isn't easy, but this is the third reprinting of this deck over the years. I think perhaps 𝗺𝗁𝗺𝗺, but it's the third. It's been out for a long time. So, yeah. Everyone probably thinks I'm really mean now, but that stuff like that just does genuinely annoy me. It would annoy me if it was my own as well, right? Like, incredibly. I'm not saying that I wouldn't do it because, like I say, I think those mistakes are easily done. But I think I would have noticed since 2016 and wanted to rectify it. But maybe no one else has literally ever mentioned it either. So we've got the page, and I love that we've got a flower here. It gives a very gentle, emotional, heart on sleeve kind of aspect, especially with the petals falling. Okay, so we're not seeing a knight here, but we do have a knight's... What is it with me and forgetting words today? Anyway, it's part of their armour. It's fancy. It's fancy too. I still feel the same about the knights. And then the queen and the king. And so here, the queen's waters are more stirred up. And the king's are overflowing, but far more still. I can work with this. I don't know if I would have done this for the queen or whether I might have had this maybe not overflowing and this overflowing and surrounding, like really all-encompassing, as opposed to kind of, it looks like it's thrown the cup up in the air. The king and the queen make me think inappropriate things. Joanna, you can't say that and then not tell me what they are. So you know, I want to know. Tell us your inappropriate things as we go through the last. So we've got the pentacles, and I mean, their hands with bones. I'm loving it. Also, the fact that the hands are there feels like, to me, it's, I know that they've been in other things, but like both of them laid out in this capacity is like, we're really here to do the body work, the physical work, to be hands-on in this realm, and that's how I see this suit. The 2 here gives me less less of that juggling vibe, but more of that, like, that journey and the strength and the challenges that go from being the conception of the seed in the ground to like rooting into this grand tree. But there is a lot of structure to this tree aside from the leaves, and it's interesting. It's almost like they've fallen down the tree, like they're moving with the leaves. I don't have much to add to that. Like, it's a really pretty card. Okay. The white dripping liquids and stuff, you know. Well, I mean, in that sense, then it would make me feel like this makes much more, it's far more relevant. Far more relevant. I can get behind that. I'm here for it. It is like, I mean, you could argue that you could feel like ecstasy in both the cups and the wands, but I feel like it's more of a cuppy thing. Although fire does feel like it fuels that, so I'm sort of torn, but I'm here for it. The 3, it has the triangle. We know I like the triangle and the coming together for the 3, and then working together. So I do actually get that from this, which is why I don't know why I'm struggling with this card. It's not often that I struggle to, like, even if a card's very, and I keep saying left of field, but even if it is, I often don't struggle to find a way to conceptualize it, and it doesn't take me very long. It's probably one of the things I like most about the way I read, is that I can work with almost any artwork, whether I like it or not. I can find meaning, which is essentially what we're doing anyway. But for that one, it's just not happening. This one is very interesting. This person feels very inhuman to me as well. Like, this doesn't feel like a human individual. They're too long. I like it. It's kind of, it feels like a statue. But I am enjoying the sitting position of this. And I think that it opens that space from people to decide whether they want to go more the 𝗬𝗁𝗍𝗂 route, which seems to be very much fueled by, like, holding on to things in a greedy way. I don't necessarily see it as greed, and I think that holding on to things and taking a moment to sort of recalibrate and take stock of what we already have is very useful. And sometimes we don't want to let things go for other reasons. So, but I think there's a lot to work with in this depiction. This is very 𝗬𝗁𝗍𝗂, but freaking adorable. Look at this person, like, they're like patting the skeleton person on the head. You've walked many miles. It's fine. You're home now. Like, I like that. And the star that we've got, the 5 points. Now, one thing I will say is this is the second card that technically doesn't have 5 pentacles in it, but it does have 5 stars. We've got the main star as the backing one. So I feel like I can let that go on this. Not that anyone cares. But for me, I can let it go on this. I still, in terms of artistic decisions, I'm not mad about it, but I get it. I'm not happy about the 10 of Cups still. 6 of Pentacles. Very, very, very abstract. Very, very pippish. I definitely, this is another one I often talk about Robin Hood in, the exchange of wealth, and I mean wealth in any capacity. It could be supporting someone with their health, whereas they support us financially, or they, you know, gift us something in kind, or not that we should expect it, but what I mean is, I mean wealth in that very vast capacity. I don't mean it just in a financial lens. But it's very pippish. It's very, very pippish. No, me either. So Joanna's saying not seeing exchange in this 6 of discs at all. Me either. And as we know from the book, I don't know why I'm picking it up, it's not going to tell us anything about the visuals in the minors, which is a weak spot for it. We've got the 7 here, which is a tree and branches. So look, these branches look similar to that 10 of Cups, which apparently I'm having issues with still. Which is again why I don't feel like it represents a cup. Anyway, this does give me very 7 of discs, pentacles, whatever you want to call it, vibes. And if you nourish something, then it continues to grow, perhaps not how you thought it would. I love all these like interesting shapes, but it grows, and it will do something from what we put into it. And then this again, I feel like this is the boiling down of the 𝗬𝗁𝗍𝗂 and the 8. So I don't have much to say about this. You've got your tools here. I am going to count because I'm annoying. There's 4 there, and then there's 4 there. So there's 8. There's 8. This is, again, very 𝗫𝗁𝗺𝗃, but you know what I'm going to say? It's got a bird, which it has. Oh, we've gone blurry again. Hold on, folks. We will be back. We're not blurring right at the end. This is not acceptable. And we're back. Just in case we didn't see this card, and thank you for the heads up, Joanna. We've got 𝗫. I love this card. I wear my hair like this sometimes indoors, never for anyone to see me because I don't have the balls, if I'm quite honest, but it's very 𝗫𝗁𝗺𝗃, but I'm here for it. I enjoy it. I'm back and I'm crisp again. And then this glorious 10 that has 10. Yes. Very pippish, but like almost gives me 𝗪𝗂𝗍 vibes. I'm pretty sure that it's not. I don't know. I don't have, with all the pip decks I own, I don't have one traditional 𝗪𝗂𝗍. I probably need to do something about that because I have a 𝗻𝗃 and I have a 𝗫𝗁𝗺𝗺. I don't have a 𝗪𝗂𝗍. I don't feel like I need one, but at the same time, as it's something that I study or have an interest in, it is kind of useful for reference. But yeah, this gives me those vibes. So in contrast to each other, very, very stark contrast, right? But that's not so much a problem for me as the few cards that just purely don't seem to make sense. This page looks like they're looking into a crystal ball. I love that. It's like they want to know what they're going to cultivate before they've cultivated it. Fun. I know it's a pentacle, just maybe on a stand, but it's giving me crystal ball vibes. We've got your standard knight. And then for the king and the queen, we've got these acorns. So this is what I'm assuming is meant to be like oak. And then this king, which underneath it almost looks like the reverse of a mountain. Or maybe like an iceberg or something like that. It gives me like an interesting structure reverse kind of vibe. They're very peaceful, which I expect in terms of not so much about the king queen, like the human hierarchy layer, which is not really a thing of mine, but I do see them as a progression. And I suppose that's why they picked a hierarchy, right? It's an easier way to look at it. But in terms of expressions, I hope to my internal and my external expression of these by the time I've got into the end courts to be more formed and more where I want them to be, at least in their upright position. So there you have it. That is the Personal Space Tarot. Now I feel like this is going to go blurry again in a minute, which is concerning me. So I'm not going to be very much longer. Also, this has been very long as it is. But what I would say is, because I got this so late in the game, this does have a lot of contenders. And whilst they are not directly the same, they are good contenders, and they are all decks that I hold in pretty high regard. So first I've got, and maybe I'll zoom out a bit quickly if it lets me. First I've got the Antique Anatomy Tarot, which is much more traditionally pippish, is cohesive the whole way through. I think that's the word that I want anyway. And is very, it feels like if it was just these two, they would be different enough. You can see this is when I start getting into, you've got too many decks that are this colour. Because then we have the Wooden Tarot. Very, very clever deck again. Beloved deck of mine. And a nature deck that offers the same themes as this, but is is, I'm going to say, ingenious as far as I'm concerned. Like, these two decks do what they do very, very, very well. And of course, like I said, this is an older deck, but because I didn't bond with it, because I didn't get it when I wanted it, when it, you know, first went on my wish list, it does beg the question, do I keep a deck that is in competition with at least 3 of my other decks? Because then, where are we going to put it? The fur's in the way a little bit. We've got the Mesquite Tarot, which is a boiled down deck in a very, very similar capacity, but it has the benefit of, it was created a bit later, I think anyway, and it is for the most part more inclusive in terms of gender titles as well as expression. I still think that the majors have some gendered titles like the Empress and the Emperor, but the courts do not. So as you can see, the courts have got things like leader and novice. Yeah, so the High Priestess is still called the High Priestess, but the expressions of the people, that you've got like a kind of stick person thing going on. Let me read you. So the way that this goes is the novice is the page, the student is the knight, the knower is the queen, and the leader is the king. So it definitely has some things that kind of trump this, if I'm honest. One of the things that I do love about this is I still freaking love the artwork. I have to say, I really, really love the artwork. But one of the reasons that I wanted to go through this process with, you know, with you, bringing you folks along, was I really wanted to put it under like the scrutiny that I would behind the scenes. And this is what I'm like with my decks now. I do have, I suppose, a gentle internal number that I don't like to own like too many more than, dependent on circumstance and reasoning at the time these things adjust. But like, I am not at a stage where I'm gathering decks, and I haven't got that many this year anyway, but for me to have got one and not used it is a problem for me. And so that's why I wanted to go through this. And I have to say, despite feeling really in love with some of the artwork, I'm not sure, you know, I'm not sure how and whether this is going to remain something that can, you know, quote unquote, take up space for the personal space. Because what personal space means to me, so many of these other decks do so well for me already. And all of the things that I appreciate about this, I appreciate about these. And they have other strengths that this one hasn't necessarily brought through. As I say, there are some magical vibes. There are some weird bits that I felt very Arthurian. So I'm not saying a definite no, but I have to say, for the few cards that didn't land for me, I don't know is the answer. And I'm not going to lie, the Ten of Cups is still irritating me. So there's that. But that is the end, and it's been an hour and a half, so I don't want to, and it looks like it's going blurry again. So I will tell my partner about the internet connection, but he is already wanting to rip his hair out thanks to the internet connection. So I'm sure that he's going to be elated that the Wi-Fi has been playing up again. And I don't know how much replayability that's given it, because who's going to watch a video that goes blurry 3 times? Perhaps someone. But I really appreciate those of you that hung out. I have to agree, Joanna. Joanna says the personal space tarot kind of feels like a minimalistic version of the Tarot del Fuego, not her fave. And actually the Tarot del Fuego is a deck that I had for a very, very long time. And hey Logan, you're going to watch it back. Logan, spoiler alert, I'm about to video you, my friend, after I think my package came. So there's that. Sorry, mini moment between me and Logan. Yeah, the Tarot del Fuego, I even had a series on it at one point, but in the end of the day I realised that my skill of making artwork have some semblance of sense to it was really what was making that deck work for me, and I actually parted with it. It was beloved. I enjoyed my time with it. There was some representation in there that I fucking loved, like really loved. Even to this day I think of some of those pictures in my mind, like the really curvaceous big boobed individual with a moustache, great depiction. But a wild Logan appears. Yes, it's like Pokemon. Yeah, it didn't hold its own in the end enough for me, and I was ready to let it go despite having quite an emotional and long-term attachment to it. It was heavily used, that deck. I hope the person that bought it is really enjoying it, because it was a special one, but it was neglected in the end, and this has been neglected. So yeah, same for you, 𝗲𝗁𝗺𝗀𝗀𝗀. You never look back though. No, I wouldn't. I have moments where I'm like, oh, I loved that deck, but not to the point where I'm like, oh, I should buy it back. And honestly, I think half the beauty of a deck is the bond that you've created with it. So for me, I don't tend to get into buying things back, because I don't want to try and recreate something I once had. And that's not something I would hold against anyone else. It's just a me thing, right? This curvaceous and moustached individual sounds rad as fuck. They are. You would like them. I'll find a picture at some point. But yeah. You've got to get stealthier next time. Yeah. Your rogue levels there, they're foul. They're a foul. So anyway, thank you for hanging out with me. Let me know if you managed to watch this back by some miracle, what you think. What does the Personal Space Tarot say to you? For all its beauty, for all its fun parts, is it a yay, is it a nay, why? And yeah, like I said, Personal Space Tarot, and just for those who are wondering, again, Antique Anatomy Ephemera, mass market, Wooden Tarot, Mesquite Tarot. Can't get some of these now as well, so sorry peeps. But yeah, that's me out. Thank you, my friends, for showing up and your lovely comments. And I will see you all again in the near future. Probably not live until we fix the internet. But yeah, I'll be back soon. So bye.